Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
these are hardworking residents who, for the most part, own their homes.
Cook County property owners face spiraling debt as private investors buy up their unpaid taxes.
We get a better product when we have balance in public policy.
A fast test for new state leaders, the battle over Illinois' criminal justice law.
A historic same-sex marriage bill advances in the U.S. Senate. Our Spotlight Politics team on that and much more.
Medical student burnout, how one local university is working to combat it.
Liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
And NASA successfully launches its rocket to the moon 50-plus years after Apollo 11.
But first, some of today's top stories. A bill that would codify the right of same-sex and interracial couples to marry clears a crucial hurdle in the U.S. Senate. 12 Republicans voted with all 50 Senate Democrats to advance the Respect for Marriage Act bill, allowing debate to begin. Momentum to codify marriage rights for same-sex and interracial couples grew amid concerns the Supreme Court's conservative majority could overturn protections. A final vote on the bill could come later this week.
Construction on the Obama Presidential Center is resuming 6 days after a noose was found on the work site. In a statement, Lakeside Alliance, the builders of the center, say that since the incident, all staff and on-site workers have had anti-bias training and that additional safety measures have been implemented. And tomorrow's part of our weekly In Your Neighborhood series will have a live report from the Woodlawn community where the center is being built.
Faculty at the University of Illinois Chicago vote to authorize strike action. The faculty's union says that 97% of members who voted endorsed authorizing a strike. The faculty says they've been working without a contract since August 16th. The union says that despite more than 7 months of negotiation, the administration has, quote, refused to adequately address issues of compensation, clear workload policies, and job security. UIC, for its part, says in a statement, quote, it believes continuing dialogue is the best path forward to come to a mutual agreement on the outstanding articles in the union contract. The union says a strike could take place as early as December.
And coming up on the program, NASA's latest mission.
But first, trouble for some Cook County property owners. We explain right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
That time of the year, property taxes are out and due at the end of next month. But for those that are delinquent, the semi-annual Cook County tax sale is underway right now. That's where private investors swoop in and purchase tax debt, leaving homeowners with giant interest payments if they want to avoid losing their home altogether. It can be a vicious cycle, and it's prompted the Cook County treasurer to call the system a, quote, racket. She's now proposing big changes.
Henry Johnson is a retired school teacher and has lived in this bungalow on North Kedvale for 42 years. 4 years ago, his wife died. That same year, Johnson fell behind on his property tax payment.
My wife, she was sick, and she was an educator. She's able to help with everything, but after that, you know, that made a big difference.
Per state law, Johnson was charged 1.5% interest for every month the tax bill was late, accruing to 18% over the course of a year. After that period, delinquent properties like Johnson's are eligible for the Cook County tax sale, administered by the Cook County Treasurer's Office. That's where a private investor buys the debt and can make big profits off of it.
Basically, this is very poor people paying very rich people.
Very poor people paying the wealthiest in the country, beyond the wealthiest. These are hedge funds.
The investor now charges the homeowner 12% interest every year. The homeowner has 3 years to pay this off before possibly losing their property altogether. In that time, the total interest accrues to 54%. Henry Johnson's original tax bill was less than $1,800. Subsequent bills, interest, and fees shot his total payment up to $8,173, all owed at once if he wanted to keep his home.
So what was already an insurmountable challenge becomes something that just seems impossible. And we step in to say, no, it's possible. Do you want to keep it? Let's figure out a way to do it.
Tiffany Smith is Associate Director of Neighborhood Housing Services of Chicago. She says the tax sale disproportionately hits Black and Latino homeowners, especially seniors like Johnson, who are on fixed incomes.
Thank you.
They actually have their American dream. And for it to be stolen, and in some degrees, that's what it is, right? We're taking it away from them at a percentage of the value of the home.
Pappas and Smith say their offices go door to door to reach homeowners ahead of time to check and see if they haven't claimed money the county actually owes to them.
Look at what they're spending on their property taxes, if they have missing exemptions, if they have refunds that are sitting out there.
Vulnerable citizens who haven't gotten a homeowner, haven't gotten a senior, and haven't gotten a senior freeze, going back 4 years, that's $6,000.
Smith and Pappas say an ideal scenario would be to eliminate the tax sale altogether.
There's 30 states in America that have annual tax sales. So this isn't new. This has been going on for hundreds of years.
Brad Westover is president of the National Tax Lien Association, a group that represents tax buyers. He says the tax sale is necessary because without the penalty, homeowners wouldn't have incentive to pay taxes on time. Plus, the private buyer provides the missing revenue owed to government.
And sometimes they have a budget shortfall because of the non-payment of property taxes. So this process is a means by which kind of everybody pays their fair share.
But Smith says the tax sale defeats the purpose it was intended for.
There's a lot of self-eviction when those property taxes are sold, which leads to vacant properties. It becomes a blight on the communities that can ill afford it.
To make matters worse, the investor rarely keeps the property when it comes time to go to deed. In fact, they can get their initial investment back.
A recent study from the Cook County Treasurer's Office found that many tax buyers used a loophole in state law to get a full refund on the property taxes that they'd paid.
That's because they exploit what's called the sale and error law to get out of a contract if anything about the property doesn't match up with what was advertised.
The website of the assessor says that there's an air conditioner and there's no air conditioner. I thought there was a toilet and there's no toilet. I thought there was a basement, there is no basement. Here, take it back.
The study found that local taxing bodies paid out $280 million over the last 8 years to tax buyers as a result of the sale and error loophole.
It's a legalized racket that we need to break up, and we're going to do it.
Treasurer Pappas says she's preparing legislation in Springfield to make big changes to the tax sale that would eliminate the sale and error law, cut the first year's delinquent tax interest in half, exempt those owing $1,000 or less, and provide a payment plan to those that remain. Westover admits the sale and error loophole has been exploited and says his industry is open to all of these changes.
If they don't have the funds to redeem their tax bill in full, then collecting partial payments over time makes perfect sense.
Johnson recently paid off his debt by rearranging bills, and he got a matching grant from Neighborhood Housing Services. But he says he would have benefited from these proposed changes.
Well, there was sleepless nights and worried, but back in my mind there was going to be some way, somehow it was going to be done.
Now, the current tax sale is for properties that haven't yet paid their 2020 taxes. Sale began yesterday and lasts until November 21st. And now, Brandis, back to you.
And Paris, thank you. Illinois is set to make history when the state eliminates cash bail next year. But there's controversy over how the law will go about it. It is a central debate for state legislators. Amanda Venneke joins us now from Springfield, where lawmakers met today. Amanda.
Yeah, Brandis, the future of criminal justice is in play. Illinois Democrats passed that major criminal justice overhaul known as the Safety Act 2 years ago. But it is getting a lot of attention now for two reasons. One is because a major component of it, and that is the move to eliminate cash bail, goes into effect soon in January. And the other is because Republicans really spent most of this election trying to hammer the message to Illinois voters that the law is dangerous. It's a message that State Senator Robert Peters says voters roundly rejected. Illinois Republicans got a shellacking.
We have to look at what happened last week. It was a mandate. $50 million in the primary, $50 million in the general, $100 million overall. They said all types of things, end of days, purge. It's all over. We're still here.
Backers of the law, like Peters, say that cash bail is racist and it punishes the poor. They celebrate this move as historic.
This will make Illinois the first state in this here union to end the practice of jailing people because they don't have money to buy their freedom.
And they are pushing back against efforts to retool the law.
We can't afford rollbacks. We can't afford cuts to the bill. We can't afford changes to the bill. We must have pretrial fairness. We must have a safety act that addresses police brutality and all of the other issues that are rolled up into that monumental bill. And it has to go forward as it is written.
Now, the prospect that the law could be changed is not just a theoretical one. About half of Illinois' state's attorneys are suing to strike the law from taking effect, with many of them saying that the law itself is flawed and could prevent judges from having the ability to keep locked up dangerous criminals before those criminals have actually stood trial. Now, it's not just them. Some Democrats, various legislators, the Attorney General, and Governor J.B. Pritzker have also said that the law needs some fixes and should be changed. Here's Pritzker last week.
Oh, there's a lot of work that's been done by the General Assembly over the last number of months in working groups, and so they're going to bring that to the veto session, and I'll be watching carefully. I've made my thoughts clear, and we'll see if we can get something done during the veto session to address the changes that we ought to be making.
The first week of the veto session now over. Legislators discussed the Safety Act behind closed doors but did not take any action on the floor. That could still, however, happen after Thanksgiving. The second half of veto session is scheduled to take place then. But questions remain. Will there be enough support to make changes to the Safety Act? And if so, how far will those changes go? Now, former prosecutor John Curran says the Republicans have not been part of those talks. Just last night, Illinois Senate Republicans elected Curran as their new leader.
Unfortunately, I've not been involved, so we've continued to be frozen out of this process. I am in regular communication with the state's attorneys that are at the negotiating table and involved, as well as chief of police representative and the sheriff representative. So it sounds like it's been a very uneven process that's taking place behind closed doors. If they open that process up, I think we can get a lot of these issues resolved.
Now, Democrats nearly outnumber Republicans 2-1 in the General Assembly. Curran says he knows full well, therefore, that Democrats can go it alone.
What we know is the go-it-alone path is going to produce results that are not meeting the needs of working families in Illinois. They are at the point they're not going to be able to handle their base if they go it alone. They need Republicans participating in the process in a meaningful manner in order to moderate and bring balance to what we do as policymakers for all Illinoisans. So we play an incredible, important role. Democrats would be foolish not to respect that and invite that in.
He says if Democrats do extend that invitation, he will be there. He says that the Safety Act is a prime example of how working together in bipartisan fashion could have led to a better law.
And you look at the 2 years of turmoil and public consternation and fear that is created because of the go-it-alone approach. Republicans were frozen out 2 years ago in that process. It is clearly a flawed bill We've done 3 trailer bills already. We're going to do at least a couple more trying to fix this bill.
Now, Curran says that he does back the notion of moving away from cash bail, but he says the law as written does have flaws. He says that they are flaws that are workable. Still, for backers of eliminating cash bail, what critics call as flaws, they see as akin to completely gutting the very heart of what they aim to accomplish with the Safety Act. Curran, by the way, is set to become the official new leader of the Illinois Senate Republicans in mid-January. He says that other priorities include helping working families, and he says to unburden employers so they can create more jobs. Not just the Senate, the Illinois House Republicans will be getting a new leader as well, and we're set to talk to her coming up. For now, back to you in the studio.
Amanda, thanks. We'll see you shortly. And now to Paris for details on a long-distance trip, so to speak. Paris.
Brandon, it's 50-plus years after Apollo 11. NASA is taking one not-so-small step toward returning humans to the moon. It comes after NASA's successful launch of the Artemis 1 rocket. The much-anticipated launch comes after previous technical and weather delays. The rocket is unmanned, but is designed to eventually send the first woman and first person of color to the lunar surface. And here to talk about this historic mission and what's next is Bob Cabana, NASA Associate Administrator and former astronaut. He's also a veteran of 4 space shuttle flights. Bob Cabana, thank you so much for joining us today. So first of all, tell us about Artemis 1's mission.
Absolutely, Paris. It was so darn exciting this morning seeing that rocket lift off. This is an uncrewed test flight of the Orion spacecraft and the rocket itself, the Space Launch System. It's going to go into orbit around the moon. It's going to go 40,000 miles beyond the moon, last for about 25 and a half days. And it's a complete checkout of the Orion spacecraft without crew to ensure that it's safe when we do put crew on it. The big test is going to be on the heat shield as it comes back in at lunar reentry velocities into the Earth's atmosphere, does a skip reentry, and is recovered off the coast of San Diego in the Pacific Ocean. The heat shield that we're flying on this flight is different from the one that was originally tested on the Exploration Flight Test 1 flight back in December of 2014. And so we want to make sure that it operates properly. That's a critical element. So an uncrewed flight in preparation for Artemis 2, where we actually send a crew to the moon but do not land on the moon. Critical test flight for us.
And so all these things need to be figured out before you put people back on that rocket. What's the timeline for Artemis 2 then, and for folks to go orbit the moon again?
Absolutely. So it's going to be 2 years from Artemis 1. And the reason for that is there are black boxes. There's equipment on Artemis 1 that needs to be taken out and put into the Artemis 2 Orion spacecraft and thoroughly tested before we fly the Artemis 2 flight. So in 2 years from now, in late 24, we'll be flying the Artemis 2 mission to the moon with a crew of 4, but not landing on the moon. And then 1 year after that, we'll be flying Artemis 3. And that's the one where we actually land on the moon. We'll rendezvous with the human landing system and go down to the lunar surface. And I can't wait to see that again.
The moon will be eager to see humans, Earthlings, back again. So once that does happen, what are the goals for human manned space flight and landing on the moon? What do you want to study when you're back?
Well, first off, this is different from Apollo in that we're going back to the moon in a sustainable way. We're going in partnership with our industry and our commercial partners, as well as our international partners. And as was mentioned by you earlier, Paris, you know, the astronaut corps that we have today is much different from the one back in the 60s and 70s. We're going to put the first woman, the first person of color on the moon. The astronauts represent who we are as a nation. Everybody can see themselves in NASA's astronaut corps. Artemis is going to inspire a whole new generation of explorers, and that's critical. As we go back to the moon in a sustainable way, and we still have a lot to learn about the moon, we're going to the south pole of the moon because there's water ice there. That's hydrogen and oxygen, fuel and air. We're going to utilize the resources of the moon as we stay on the moon for extended periods of time. We're going to have rovers, pressurized rovers, habitats, learn how to operate on the moon away from planet Earth, and we're going to be developing the tools and resources that we need to be successful when we go on to Mars. So it's just truly an exciting time.
When's the future prospective Mars mission, you think?
Oh, that's going to be in the 2040s. We got a lot to learn and a ways to go to get there, but that's coming down the road also.
So this moon, going back to the moon, definitely is an essential step. You know, these missions, I've read, cost tens of billions of dollars. You said you're doing it more sustainably with private partners. So is it sustainable to keep doing these missions given the cost?
So one of the things that we're working on is reducing the cost of the space launch system in the Orion spacecraft with our exploration production operations contract. So we are looking to make changes from that point of view. We are going in partnership. Our international partners are also going to be paying for modules on the gateway. We're going to be doing it together with them. So we're trying to do this in a sustainable way that actually paves the way for exploration beyond our home planet. I think it's going to be very exciting.
A new era of lunar exploration. And Bob Cabana, I know it's been a long couple days, very exciting. By the way, everything is okay, because I know there were some delays, weather delays. Everything went off without a hitch, right?
So far, everything's tracking well. We did have a problem last night. You know, as we had hydrogen leaks on our previous launch attempts, those were on the vehicle itself. Last night, we had a hydrogen leak in the mobile launcher, and we actually sent the red team out to the mobile launch platform while the vehicle was fueled and ready to go, a hazardous situation, and they were able to retorque some bolts on a valve in order to get this leak where it was down within limits so we could actually launch. So those guys are heroes. That was a pretty cool job that they did.
Wow, very hazardous. NASA engineers doing what they do best, thinking on the fly. Our thanks to Bob Cabana. Best of luck, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Paris.
And up next, the fight against burnout among students in medical school. So please stay with us.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
Healthcare workers are trained to care for patients, but sometimes they may need support in caring for themselves. A survey finds nearly 3/4 of younger frontline healthcare workers reported burnout during the pandemic. And medical students are particularly vulnerable to the stressors that come with entering and working in the field. Joining us now are Nurali Chowan, second-year medical student and member of the Student Wellness and Resilience Committee at UIC, and Jenna Duffy, Associate Professor of Clinical Psychiatry and Director of University of Illinois at Chicago's Resiliency Center, which provides mental health services to UIC's College of Medicine's graduate and medical students. Thanks to you both for joining us. Jenna Duffy, let's start with you, please. And would you please describe burnout and how it might present in medical students?
So burnout is considered to be some of those symptoms that you might expect. Things like anxiety, difficulty sleeping, trouble with concentration, loss of enjoyment and things. But when we're talking about burnout, there's some other specific symptoms. So it's things like compassion fatigue, the difficulty connecting with people and caring, difficulty with kind of just emotional exhaustion, just not being able to feel things anymore, and not getting any sense of reward or enjoyment out of your work. And so we do see this in medical students as well as in physicians and other healthcare providers.
Okay, thank you. Nurali Chowan, what are some of the common stressors that might contribute to burnout in medical students?
I think it's no surprise that medical students have higher perceived stress than other age-controlled students. The training is challenging. It's expensive, competitive, fast-paced with large workloads, and that's before you add in the anxiety, stress, and uncertainty of a global pandemic. Like Dr. Duffy mentioned, it can lead to depression, dropout, professional impairment down the line, making it really critical to address early on. And for those reasons, it's very important for medical schools to signal early on that wellness is a top priority.
Jenna Duffy, let's talk about the work of the Resiliency Center and what you all are doing to help prevent or address burnout in medical students.
Yeah, so we offer a wide range of services, and it's things like traditional face-to-face psychotherapy. We offer support groups. We also have some digital self-help tools that have been developed specifically for our medical students. We're also in the process of offering some computerized adaptive testing for mental health screenings, as partially as a way to normalize the importance of checking in on your mental health.
And we should mention the center opened right before the pandemic. I imagine things changed shortly after.
Yeah, the pandemic really opened, made it clear that this was an important service and a really necessary thing. I think the medical students really got thrown in the deep end with this, in that kind of trying to approach clinical service for the first time, understanding the needs of patients in such a complicated circumstance. And so I think it's really been just so important that they have a place that is prioritizing their mental health and well-being, and that we can make it clear that as an institution, as a field, that their mental health and their well-being matters.
Nurali, you teach a class for other medical students that address mental health. What made you want to teach this class?
That's right. So outside of medical school, I'm a meditation teacher, and I never really had any intention to teach at the medical school. I think over time, as a student and as a concerned peer, I saw that perhaps there were some tools that I had that I could share with my fellow classmates, both in the classroom setting and an extracurricular setting. That said, as someone that teaches and employs mindfulness tools to decrease anxiety or improve a sense of well-being, I strongly believe that promoting self-care cannot be the entire conversation. And that's why places like the Resiliency Center are so important. It's really, really critical for schools to examine not only the learning environments, but training culture as a whole, so that self-care and self-promotion is just one of those things that can help prevent burnout and distress among students.
Is mental health, Nurali, something that med students are comfortable speaking about openly?
I think the culture is certainly changing. Mental health is becoming more and more of a conversation that we're comfortable with, mostly because I think one of the things that makes all humans connected with one another is that everyone is overcoming some sort of adversity. Medical students are put into this pressure cooker where they have a very unique experience with one another. And our school, I think UIC has really stepped up in opening up these conversations early on from day one, rather than shying away from burnout and distress. We're really talking about it. We are also talking about where adequate resources are provided. And I think not only is it about preventing burnout and distress, but also addressing those that are already affected by it as well. And that two-pronged approach is really important. And I think our school has done an excellent job in that area.
Jenna, what are some of the barriers that might prevent a medical student from getting help if they're experiencing symptoms, or from even recognizing them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of kind of healthcare specific concerns, right? I think things like privacy, concern about reaching out to get support from people who might be professional contacts for you in the future. I think we have things like time issues. And then I think there's all of those things that are kind of issues probably for all of us in getting mental health care. Things like the cost barriers, the wait lists that we deal with. And generally, sometimes that sense of like, why can't I just do this on my own? And interestingly, we have some really lovely data from our work here with the medical students about how those who have sought mental health treatment have lower stigma around talking about mental health care and increased interest in sharing the need for mental health care with patients. So I think we've learned at this point that by giving the students more access to this and helping them to overcome those barriers that limit their access to mental health, that we can actually not only help them, but potentially help their future patients as well.
Nurali, we've got just a few seconds left, but what kind of support do you think is vital to have at a time when more medical students are experiencing this kind of burnout?
I think what Dr. Jeffessy was sharing about community is incredibly important. One of my favorite quotes is, when you stand in your truth, you allow other people to do the same. So there's really this domino effect when you create a community and a culture of being open about this. That said, then having adequate resources like counseling, like group therapy, like advocacy for other health resources, all of these things are really important. It's not just one thing that can prevent burnout. We have to come at it from all different angles, because all people are different with different needs as well. And I think what is really important to know is that the students of today are the physicians of tomorrow. And it's so important to create environments early in training to support the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of medical students' lives.
probably a good idea to take care of them now so they can take care of the rest of us later. That's where we'll have to leave it. Jenna Duffy and Nirali Chowan, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you.
And there's more Chicago Tonight just ahead, so stick around.
Still to come on Chicago Tonight, we check in with Illinois House GOP leader-elect Tony McCombie about her new role and her hopes for working across the aisle. Will he or won't he? Our Spotlight Politics team looks at a possible run for mayor by former Governor Pat Quinn.
A huge part of building community is sharing food with each other.
And a taste of a virtual cooking camp for Chicago public school students. But first, some more of today's top stories. Democratic senators in Washington set a December deadline to pass bipartisan legislation to create a pathway to citizenship for immigrants who came to the country as children, also known as dreamers. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin says there's a limited window right now to pass legislation before Republicans take control of the House of Representatives.
We need 10 Republicans who will step up and join us in this effort. I can think of 4 or 5 as I stand here. We need more. We've got an opportunity. That opportunity is the month of December. I'm prepared to sit down with any Republican in the Senate who wants to talk about this issue.
More than 600,000 undocumented people are enrolled in the Obama-era Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. Music festivals that stage in city parks now have to go through more hoops to get approved. The Chicago Park District's Board of Commissioners approved a measure to give it the final say on doling out those permits. Festivals like Riot Fest and Pitchfork have drawn outcry from local residents who complain of losing access to parks in peak summer months, as well as damage to the area afterwards. Commissioners say the new process will allow for more community engagement. The commissioners will also have final say on Lollapalooza, which attracts hundreds of thousands of music lovers to Grant Park each year. The Park District's general superintendent will not be allowed to overrule any board decision on this. The Chicago Police Department issues a community alert following several reports of checks stolen from U.S. postal boxes. Nearly a half dozen such incidents were recorded in October, with thefts occurring across the city from Garfield Ridge to Rogers Park. According to police, the suspects are using postal keys to open mailboxes and remove mail. They then either, quote, wash the checks, erasing the ink and writing in a new payee, or make a new check with routing and account numbers from the stolen checks. Police advise people to steer clear of using standalone mailboxes when sending checks and to use a post office instead. And now we check back in with Amanda Vinicki, who is in Springfield. Amanda, you have a guest with you.
Yes, I do, Paris. Joined right now by the House Republican leader-elect, Tony McCombie. She's a state representative from the northwestern part of the state, in border town of Iowa. It's been in the Illinois House since 2016, but again, come mid-January, you are set to become the first woman in one of these 4 top legislative positions. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
What does it mean to take on that historic status?
Well, I certainly appreciate it and look forward to hopefully motivating other women to step up and come forward into this political field. But I was also the first female mayor of my small hometown. So that was a first for me, and I appreciate that. But certainly I don't believe that the caucus chose me for those reasons.
And by the way, let me be clear that Senate Republicans previously also had a woman leader in Christine Radonio, but there has yet to be a woman in the position of Senate President or House Speaker. Moving on from that, why do you believe that your fellow colleagues did choose you for this role?
Well, with my combination of the years being here in Springfield, the work that I've done on our political arm, the fundraising I've done, the relationships I've built, I certainly had the resume, and they chose me because I was the best candidate, and that's how it should be.
What is your read on what happened last Tuesday? I described it in an earlier segment as Illinois Republicans taking a shellacking.
Yeah, and I think some of us have different opinions on that, but for me, I believe we just didn't have the right candidates on the ballot for our independents, our moderates, our young voters, and especially our women.
What do you mean by that? Who in particular was a bad candidate?
Oh, we had We had a record number of candidates this year. I think the House Republican majority, they had 102, 105 candidates. So that's a lot of candidates to work around the state. That's a lot of diversity. And we had a great panel of candidates, but they just weren't resounding to those independents.
Are we talking about at the very top of the ballot? Just yesterday spoke with the person who currently holds the role you will take over, who said, yeah, Darren Bailey, too conservative.
Well, I certainly think he was too conservative for some parts of the state, but, you know, looking around the state as a whole, he wasn't to the state as a whole, right? So certainly that would affect those suburban members, the city members, for sure.
How do you turn things around statewide?
Well, it's certainly going to be not easy, that's for sure. But we have messages. The Democrats have continued to fail in Illinois. They didn't win the election because they're winning on the issues of crime, economy, corruption. That's for sure. So it's going to take a lot of work. And nobody in this caucus can say that I'm not a hard worker. And I look forward to working on candidate recruitment, getting those folks, candidates who want to be here and who don't need to be dragged across the finish line, that are really going to work their district and support their district. And we're going to have to get a little more diverse with that.
You know, I know I have talked on our program about sort of a divide in the Republican Party that we're seeing play out in Illinois as elsewhere between the more establishment or moderate Republicans and then those who are either big backers of former President Donald Trump or more conservatives. Do you see it like that? Is that a divide playing out within the party?
Well, I think there's always differences of opinions, right? And we are open to all of those. It certainly has caused, some angst, but we have those conversations in caucus, and that's what it's for. But as a party as a whole, that's going to be one of the biggest goals of mine, and hopefully the new Senate leader is to unify our caucus and the Republican Party in the state. We are the folks that are seriously working on true reforms, political and structural reforms that are going to build our state, and so people aren't going to continue to leave. Where I live, we see it all the time.
So your top goal as the new leader, if you could accomplish something, maybe if you were House Speaker, you could wave that wand and make something happen in the Capitol, what would it be?
Yeah, we need to bring balance to the floor here. As you're going to see as this comes in the 103rd, the balance is certainly out of reach, and we need to bring more Republicans to bring balance to Illinois.
Once again, thank you so much and congratulations and best wishes to you. That is Tony McCombie, state representative now, but will become the House Minority Leader come January, as elected last night by her fellow House Republican colleagues.
A lot of changes in the House. All right, Amanda, thanks very much. And we'll see you again in just a moment for Spotlight Politics. But first, we take a look at the weather.
I object to this weather. Will a former governor run for mayor? Plus, a historic vote in the U.S. Senate. That and much more to talk about with our Spotlight Politics team. Joining us now, Amanda Vinicky in Springfield, Heather Sharon, and, of course, Paris Schutz. Welcome back, everybody. So let's start, though, with the Cook County tax bills that are hitting property owners' mailboxes. Heather, there are a lot of folks with some sticker shock. What about all those campaign ads that touted lower property tax bills before the election?
Well, I'm sure everybody saw my very clear, very fun explainer on how property taxes are calculated. If you have a better grasp on how complicated the system is. Politicians can promise we're going to lower your property tax bill, but there are a lot of different things go into it, including the share of the burden between commercial properties and homes, and that is still favoring commercial property owners, according to Assessor Fritz Keke.
Paris, there's some sticker shock, but was there any shock that the bills weren't sent in until after the election?
I mean, it doesn't appear that one had anything to do with the other, because as Heather explained yesterday, there were just so many moving parts here that caused these bills to be mailed out late. The Board of Review had differences with the assessor, but who knows? Maybe someone whispered in the treasurer's ear and said, psst, you know, why don't we wait a couple of weeks? We got this thing called an election going on right now.
Would that be the Chicago way?
It would not be unprecedented in a city like Chicago, but until someone presents evidence of that, I'm not going to make that presumption.
Of course. Amanda, are there limits that state lawmakers put in place to limit property tax hikes?
Yeah, for starters, let me just say that I agree with Ferris's response, and your take on that last question there certainly raises eyebrows, but no evidence to prove that. In terms of, there is something. Illinois has the property tax extension limitation law. Whew, is that a mouthful? PTEL. And it is further complicated. It is not really a true cap on, say, the amount that your property taxes could increase. This was something that Illinois enacted when you were really seeing soaring property tax bills in the collar counties. So, yes, there is some degree of a limit. Is that anything that you're going to see and perhaps soothe you if you are one of the individuals that saw the bill you just received soar? Probably not. Not a true cap.
Okay, so moving on to other city news, Mayor Lori Lightfoot's post-city council press conference, she promoted the red line extension on the south side, but Heather, that vote happens in December, doesn't it?
It does, which is an indication that she knows that she does not yet have the votes, and that she is going to have to convince several downtown alderpeople to send tens of millions of dollars from their communities in an election year, mind you, in an election year to the far south side to extend the red line from 95th to 130th Street. And we heard the mayor cast this as an issue of fairness and equity. The north side's red line and purple lines are under reconstruction right now. Let's do the same for the south side, she said. Will it pass the city council in December? Time will tell.
We'll find out in December. Paris, what's not to like about extending the red line? Isn't this an easy win?
Yeah, I mean, everybody has been calling for this extension. And the thing is, the way to partially fund it is to institute a transit tax increment financing district, and that's what aldermen don't want to vote for. Perhaps they move this to after the election, and they vote for it in the first year of a new administration, and people will forget about it 4 years later. But the thing is, as Heather mentioned, there was a TIF instituted to redevelop the north part of the red line, and it worked. And they're not going to be able to get hundreds of millions of dollars in federal matching funds unless they come up with this money themselves. And if there's another tool to do it other than TIF, then someone should propose it. If not, speak now or forever hold your peace. You're not going to get that red line extension. So, and maybe this is something the mayor can run. And hey, I'm ready to go with this, and these older people are voting against it. Equity, you know, equal distribution.
So a potential campaign line for her. She did have enough support to prevent any action on raising the transfer tax on the sales of properties worth $1 million or more. This would fund homeless relief. But Heather, the mayor's allies were in the building. What happened?
Well, this is a clear sign that Mayor Lightfoot has come into her own as an executor of power politics at Chicago City Hall. She said, don't go to that meeting, and 25 alderpeople did not even cross the hall to go to this meeting. And this was clearly a vote, clearly a debate the mayor did not want to have, because as she told me, this will be spun as a property tax increase, and nobody wants to talk about a property tax increase in what? An election year. So that's why it didn't happen.
Everybody's favorite. Okay, so let's talk about elections a little bit. Former Governor Pat Quinn, might he announce a run for Chicago mayor? Amanda, why would he want to be Chicago's mayor?
Well, yeah, he is making an announcement tomorrow. It is at the Hotel Allegro, where he has made many major announcements in the past. And yes, of course, he's held a lot of roles in government, and he has never really faded from the political scene or moved on to another job, as often those who hold high-profile positions, such as that of, oh wait, governor, have done. I mean, he's still out there getting signatures on various referenda. He ran for Attorney General of the state of Illinois after having served as governor. So why would he want this job? I think because, in part, like many politicians, he has a healthy sense of self-worth. He also says that there's a lot that he believes he could do with the position that other candidates aren't talking about. He sees a path, and certainly with a field this voluminous, who knows who could at least eke it to a runoff and have a chance at victory.
And that field is wide, Heather. Who's he going to face, or who would he face if he decided to run?
Well, of course, Mayor Lori Lightfoot wants a second term. That would make her the first woman to be reelected Chicago mayor. She will also face Brandon Johnson, who is a Cook County commissioner and the choice of the Chicago Teachers Union. Oh yeah, U.S. Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia, he's in, along with 3 older people, and of course, Willie Wilson and Paul Vallis trying to run again after losing in 2019. Keep in mind, there were 14 candidates on the ballot in 2019. 21 candidates filed, so we could see 24 candidates go to the Board of Elections and turn in their signatures. They need 12,500. The savvy among them will turn in 3 times that number to make sure they withstand any ballot challenges.
Well, we should mention this, Heather, because you were talking about this on Twitter today. The mayor is saying she is not going to turn in her petition signatures on the first day. Traditionally, everyone makes this big show of turning in their petitions on the first day that they're eligible to do it. She's saying she's not going to do it, which begs the question, is she having trouble getting those signatures?
Well, that was what I asked her, and she said that was 100% not true. This was the way she had chosen to do it, and that she wanted to file on the last day. Now, there's a little bit of gamesmanship here, right? Because if you're in line at 9 o'clock on Monday morning, you get entered into a lottery to be first on the ballot. Does that help candidates? Maybe. I don't know, it can't hurt. And if you're in line at 5 o'clock on November 28th, you'll be in a lottery to be last on the ballot. Does that help candidates? Maybe. Who knows? It can't hurt. So that could be what she's going for, but it means that we are entering a whole new phase of this mayoral race, which is coming up.
Coming up right after the last election we just had. So meanwhile, Lori Lightfoot, she has launched her first campaign commercials. Get a look at these.
Hey, did you order thousands of new jobs and a pepperoni?
Told you she delivers.
All things Chicago. He's not.
It's your favorite commercial, Heather. Who's the target here? Who's she trying to attract?
Well, it's got to be millennials. It's got to be people who like laughing at videos online. And she's trying to make it clear that she has a sense of humor. You know, this was a topic of big discussion among the press corps this week. She started her campaign with an announcement video that was very clearly leaning into her aggressive side. I made tough decisions. You might not like them, but you hired me to make those decisions. This says, not only am I funny and I can take a joke, but I will literally bring you a pizza, which are 2 very different messages for a candidate who might be still trying to figure out how to get to voters.
Rahm had the sweater and the fireplace. Mayor Lori Lightfoot
And in another digital ad, another digital ad, the mayor also called herself humble, which is something that I think a lot of people will watch her and say, hey, wait a second, she's not necessarily one for compromise. So she's clearly, as you noted, Heather, striking a very different tone.
So, Amanda, you know, let's stick with Springfield just a little bit, because after practically every Republican slammed the Safety Act for supposedly endangering Illinois residents, as we heard report earlier, it looks as if no changes are coming to the bill during this lame duck session. Are there tweaks that are being considered?
Yeah, so we could see, again, it is after Thanksgiving, legislators will be back. And even some of the legislators that I spoke with today that you heard at that rally, Senator Peters, say, yes, there could be some changes coming, but so much of this comes down to details. Yes, there was a lot of misinformation and fake news and critics who want to throw this entire law out. There are a lot of critics, actually, that are perhaps more in the middle, including some of these prosecutors that say that they are not against the notion, but that this measure, this law needs fixes, or there is going to be some degree of havoc. I think the question is going to be whether they will be able to meet any sort of consensus, whether that will be enough to push off a lawsuit, because you're going to have that coming in early December.
Okay, and Amanda, we also heard you speak tonight with Representative Tony McCombie, and I'd like to know sort of where she and Senator John Curran are on the political spectrum, because we know the Republicans, as you said, they picked new leaders last night.
Yes, they did bring us, and actually that would have been a great question to have asked McCombie herself, something that I really tried to ask leaders to put into their own words, because there is a spectrum, and yet can be difficult to line people up along it. That said, I'm going to take a bat at doing so. Curran is somebody who represents a district in the Senate. So Senate districts are divided with 2 House districts, and one of the representatives that covers that is in fact a Democrat, the other a Republican. So he's somebody that certainly takes mostly a moderate position and knows that in fact he has to. If he wants to get reelected, his fear would likely be maybe more of a primary challenge from the right. McCombie is certainly thought of as more conservative leaning. Even so, she got pushback from what can be known as the Eastern Bloc, or members of the Illinois Freedom Caucus, who are really the most conservative and right-leaning. You had Curran elected with unanimous support from the Senate Republicans. McCombie didn't get that, in fact, because those most conservative leanings wanted somebody who'd go further. This, by the way, despite McCombie being somebody who really pushed back against some of the COVID mitigations that were put in place, for example.
Paris, will these changes help what ails the Illinois GOP?
Well, they got to try something. I mean, we had that debate on the show a couple nights ago, and I urged viewers to go online and watch that because it was very interesting. There are very different views on it. They all agree that they need to fix the infrastructure. They don't have the infrastructure that Democrats have. It helps when Democrats have unions and all kinds of big interests in their pocket. Republicans don't have that kind of get-out-the-vote infrastructure, the big political apparatus that they need, and they have a Donald Trump problem. It's not flying in Illinois. They have a lot to figure out.
Speaking of a Trump problem, we've got 30 seconds. We surprised by what we heard and saw last night, Heather?
If you were surprised, you haven't been paying attention. It was always going to come down to a third run for president by the former president. And I think that the question now for the Republicans nationally, much like the Republicans in Illinois, is do they want this to be their standard bearer for the third presidential election in a row?
They didn't 4 years ago. I remember being at the Republican National. No Republican was there in 2016. No, big Republican. They all avoided him. They thought Hillary was going to win. When he won, they won the House and Senate. Then they quickly coalesced behind him. What's to stop that from happening again this time if he still commands the base? But he's got all those investigations, lots of legal problems.
2024, it's coming right up. All right, that's Spotlight. Thanks, team. Heather, Paris, Amanda, thank you. Up next, a culinary boot camp for young people. We'll explain right after this. Do you think there's been sort of a rethinking of how those events happened here in Chicago?
I made a promise to myself in my career that every year I would make a piece of art dedicated to the memory.
Got into a zone of mentor to children. See what we can do to kind of elevate each other. We all we got at this point.
I'm using my past to push forward, to build a movement to create the world that we all want to see.
The Foundation for Culinary Arts is stirring up what they're calling a recipe for success with cooking classes for adolescents. It's a week-long summer camp that started in 2016 and has since grown into a hybrid program with a virtual experience. Arts correspondent Angel Ito recently introduced us to the Yes Chef Culinary Camp. Here's another look, and watch for a familiar face that you might recognize.
A huge part of building community is sharing food with each other.
The Yes Chef Culinary Camp. It's a free community fostered by the Foundation for Culinary Arts for under-resourced Chicago public school students from 13 to 18. After several week-long summer programs, they've decided to kick off a series of 2-day virtual camps beginning this fall.
We provide everything else from pots, pans, knives, to first aid kits and disinfecting kits for their kitchens. So they have everything they need to succeed. We also provide all of the groceries. So they're going to get not just the food to cook the recipe that they're making, but they get enough to create a meal for their entire family. And a lot of them are part of the economic structure in their home. They can't go and stay in a dorm for a week and cook. So being in their house, they're able to still be a part of what the family needs and learn something along the way.
Those lessons are taught by Chef Lisa Counts, who teaches virtually from the chopping block in Lincoln Square.
I love being able to see the kids doing all of their own work in their own kitchens. I always say if you know how to do it in your own kitchen, you're going to be set for life.
Dump it all in
I learned a few life skills too as Chef Counts shared how she teaches her own students to create dishes of their own.
This takes care of, seasoning your pans. You don't have to worry about it sticking.
With more than 20 years experience in the kitchen, Chef Counts says cooking is an important life skill because it encourages self-sustainability, among other things.
Nutrition is a huge part of cooking. I think that reading labels and going to farmers markets and knowing where your food comes from and how to prepare that properly, staying within season, only ensures that it tastes good. And we really do put a little bit of that nutrition info into every single day of camp.
While the Yes Chef Culinary Camp offers classes both online and in person, their goal remains the same.
Once you have some basic skills and you get into a kitchen, the sky's the limit.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
Should never watch a story like that when you haven't eaten dinner and you're really hungry. And that familiar face, of course, is former Check Please host Catherine D'Orio. The Yes Chef Culinary Camp is offering a holiday baking class on November 20th. Visit our website for more information. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabee family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing, and you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app, and please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Obama Center construction causes confusion for residents. We'll have a live report from Woodlawn.
And hear about a local couple's fight to make a debilitating terminal illness livable. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz, about to go get some dinner. Thanks so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.